If you follow me for Metroidvania content, then chances are you follow much bigger and more interesting Metroidvania content creators like the Metroidvania Guru. And he posted this image on his YouTube page earlier today. I'm recording this on the evening of the 29th of June 2026. I think it was today that he posted it. In fact, I can check, can't I? Oh, it might have been yesterday. It says 1 day ago. This is one of those sort yourself into a grid and try and pigeonhole your thoughts and feelings, and these things always entertain me, because just like tier lists, which, considering I run one, I don't actually really like very much, these kind of things are just, in some ways, kind of interesting, but also kind of meaningless. Because they're all about people's opinions, and some people are going to agree and some people are going to disagree, and underneath his image, it was like there was so many comments just saying, oh my god, what is this trash, stick to blah blah blah, don't do this, that's a terrible choice, yada yada yada. So naturally, considering I am reasonably well known, I think, for having not necessarily contrarian views, but unpopular views, certainly on some of the bigger named Metroidvanias. I just don't think they are as good as a lot of people say. And on my webpage, I have a very specific page dedicated to, on my website, I have a very specific page dedicated to what I do and don't like in Metroidvanias. It probably shouldn't come as a huge surprise to people when I flip over to this and say, this is kind of as far as I've got, but nothing here is final. So rather than releasing the image of this, I thought I'd talk you through my thoughts and my process. And if I'm gonna be honest, this isn't actually about talking you through my thoughts. This is me actually needing to talk myself through my thoughts, I think. So let's explain myself to myself and potentially create some shit content for you as I go. First things first, favourite game, click to add. I'm not going to put anything in that box. Which you might say, well, that completely invalidates the whole point of this demo. And it says there is no point to any of this. But I don't have a favourite Metroidvania. I've never had a favourite Metroidvania, even when I first started. I've been playing Metroidvanias for 25, 26, 27, 20, almost 30 years at this point. And yeah, I've never been able to choose a favourite Metroidvania. I've got a favourite video game. That's Bloodborne. Easy win. But, and even then, it's not perfect. There's things that I would change if it hopefully ever gets a remake, Sony. Or at least gets a PC release so we can mod the things out that I don't like. But yeah, I don't have a favourite Metroidvania. I don't think I will ever have a favourite Metroidvania. It might be that at some point something stands out so far from the pack. But, even when it was just Hollow Knight and so on and so forth, it's like, Hollow Knight's really good. But is it my favourite? Would I say that it does everything miles better than everything else? No. And now that there's so much more choice, that makes this even harder. So let's take a look at the other categories, because absolutely nothing here, well, almost nothing here, is final. And I thought it would be more interesting, for me at least, to examine the process rather than just saying, this is my image, what do you make of it? Because that just involves people shitting on you for your opinions, frankly. At least if I do it this way and people actually spend time listening to it, maybe, I don't know. Best story. There are a few games that I think are, and keep it in mind, I've got my outro tier list page open on my second monitor. So I'm constantly referring to that and the notes that I've made on all of the games on there for this. In terms of the best story, Metroidvanias are not always particularly good vehicles for telling a story. So when it comes to what is the best story, there's not actually a huge number that I have to choose from, realistically. I've got Ori and the Blind Forest, which obviously has got a really, really good emotional story, which is why it's kind of in that box right now. I personally think that Biomes has a reasonably interesting story. I think that Castlevania Order of Ecclesia has a fairly interesting story. There are elements of Metroid Dread's fairly thin story that I like. I personally think that Nine Souls has actually a really good story. I think Vigil the Longest Nights has a really good story. I think Axiom Verge has a good story. I think the story is probably the best thing about Ghost Song, but it's not delivered in a way that I got to experience it fully the first time, because it didn't present itself in a way that I could appreciate what it was doing. Basically, I didn't know that you had to keep on talking to the NPCs. So I missed out on stuff. I didn't think it was going to do the Souls thing. Iconoclasts, realistically, is not a great Metroidvania. I like it as a game, but I don't think it's a great Metroidvania, but I really like its story. Somber Echoes, with its narrator, I quite like the story of that one as well. And I could just go down the page. You know, Constance has got a decent story. Gestalt Steam and Cinder has a lot of story. I won't say it's a particularly good one. Ex Vitro has got a really well written story. Yeah, that elevated it from the D tier into the C tier for me. The story was so well written. Soldiers has a decent story. There's Shadow Complex, for me, has a really cheesy but decent story. So, as somebody, and this is where I'm going to do that whole horn tooting thing, I have a master's degree in creative writing. I am a published writer. Does that make me a judge? A good judge of what a good story is? Absolutely fucking not. I like very specific types of stories. As an English teacher, I have a postgraduate certificate in secondary education for English, drama and media studies. I've been a teacher for over 20 years, teaching English and English literature. Does that make me the be-all and end-all judge of what makes a good story? Absolutely not. I love Marvel movies. Are they good writing? Are they literature? No. But do I love the writing for them because of what it is and how easily it pisses off some people? Yes, because I'm an asshole at times. So coming back to what makes the best story in a Metroidvania game, I think it's a very difficult category to really judge. So I'm going to have to say that I think Ori and the Blind Forest had some of the best emotive story beats in any Metroidvania that I've played. It's certainly closely followed by Nine Souls. I really enjoyed talking to Shanshan in that game. And there was some really good storytelling in things like the Lady Ethereal fights and so on and so forth. I do, and this is why I'm talking you through these things, because I really enjoyed the story in that game. For me, that was the standout thing in Nine Souls. I really enjoyed the story. Even though it wasn't really a story-focused game, except it kind of was. It, as I said, difficult to judge. But in terms of, did any Metroidvanias make me cry? Yes. Or In the Blind Forest did. So, yeah. That's my current thinking on that so far. And I might end up having to come back to this. I don't know. Let's talk favourite art style. Blasphemous 2 has some of the best pixel art I have ever seen. If I was to look at what do I think are, I don't know, the top 5 games in terms, top 5 Metroidvanias in terms of pixel art, you'd have Castlevania Symphony of the Night, because despite being, oh my god, it's 30, is it 30 years old next year? It isn't, no. When did Symphony come out? 94. It's already 30 years old. No. 94 was Super Metroid. 97 was Symphony. So next year, it's 30 years. Jesus. Symphony of the Night. Anyway, wonderful. Still wonderful artwork. Blasphemous 2. Excellent. I had another one in mind. I really like the pixel art in Mummy Demastered. I know it's not a game for everybody, but I really like the pixel art in it. I had one in mind, and I've forgotten what it was, and I'm now just scrolling down. Blasphemous 2, Symphony of the Night. What have I played recently that I thought that's really nice pixel art? Gestalt, Steam and Cinder had nice pixel art, but it wasn't the thing that I was thinking of. I'm just scrolling down my page now, trying to think, what was it? What had really good pixel art? Oh, Soldiers. Of course, yes. So, Blasphemous 2, Soldiers, and Symphony of the Night, I would say, are some of the best pixel art I've seen. And I think just because of how much detail there is in Blasphemous 2, that is the top of the 3 for me. Personally, I like the over-the-top gothic sensibilities of it. Obviously, it doesn't say favourite pixel art style, it just says favourite art style. And there are other art styles that I really, really like. I love the body horror vibes in Grime. I love the painterly aesthetic, especially in places like Paint Reef in Grime 2. I like the kind of scratchy, free-flowing brush strokes of Dragonloop. I like the wonderful use of colour in Ori Will of the Wisps. I even like the artwork in something like Katama, though I won't say that's really the game's forte. Vigil the Longest Night has particularly good art, in my opinion. The environmental art and animation in Metroid Dread is superb, as far as I'm concerned. And of course, Biogun has some of the best cartoony art in any game that I've ever seen. Voidrot also. Really, really big fan of the art in that game. But I'm going to have to give it to Blasphemous 2. I just think the artwork in that game is stunning. Absolutely superb. And I think that's where that needs to go on this list. chances are some of you have already paused the video rather than getting to this place and thinking, that's not a Metroidvania. I have a long-standing, long-held belief that the older Zelda games are also Metroidvania. Dungeons, you get a power or an ability or a tool, and that allows you to go back and get other stuff in the world. Some people might say, oh, well, it's not a proper Metroidvania unless the powers are permanent. You can't just turn them on and off, or can't have... So, well, you can turn powers on and off in Symphony of the Night. Is that not a Metroidvania? But anyway, that's a stupid argument. Link's Awakening for me is... I'm going to count it because it had a huge impact on me growing up. It was arguably the first game that I played where I found exploration really rewarding. The music, the emotional impact of that storyline, it was a formative experience for me, and it's one of the reasons actually why I draw parallels between Link's Awakening and other Metroidvania games. I know it's not on my tier list because I know people will moan, and I'm sure people, as I said, will already be moaning about this if they've even watched this far, because this is a long rambly video. But for me, Link's Awakening was a formative experience. Nothing else comes close to me wanting to put it in this box. So that is an easy one to talk about. Kutama might surprise a few of you, but for any of you who have listened to me talk about Kutama this year, you will know that I really fucking love the combat in Kutama. It's like, I really enjoy the combat in Grime 2 and Grime. I really enjoy the combat in Vigil, and I really enjoy the combat in Nine Souls. Though I'm not very good at it, there's accessibility options to make it easier, which I really appreciate, and I use them for Nine Souls. I didn't complete the game at maximum difficulty. God no, I'm not that good. But I didn't need to alter anything for Kutama. For me, Kutama was perfectly balanced. It was weighty, it had variety, it was so much juice and impact, and even though there were quote-unquote only 3 weapons, of all the games in my S tier, Kutama is the one that absolutely stands out for the most satisfying combat to play. Grime 2 has got smooth and weighty combat, but Kutama is just satisfying. It's not going to be deep enough, I imagine, for a lot of people. It's not going to be crunchy enough, I imagine, for others, although I don't know how much more crunch. I don't think it's as necessarily skill-based enough for some people. Fist Forged in Shadow Torch is an example of a game with, I think, really good combat that maybe took it a little bit too far in terms of its fighting game inspiration. I really enjoyed the weapons in Fist, but I still have a bit of a sour taste in my mouth from trying to 100% it and having to go through those kind of fighting game style challenges, which I didn't really like. Hollow Knight and Silksong have obviously got quite well liked combat. I personally, and this is going to piss some people off, I know, I found the combat in those 2 games and in games like Mio, I found the combat just a little bit too simplistic. So yes, by all means, downvote the video and tell me I suck in the comments and so on and so forth. I know it's going to happen because of what's on my second row. Let's get on to that, shall we? Because I don't want this video to be 3 hours long. Oh, it's already 20 minutes. Jesus. Okay. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is in the Overhated. It is somewhat of a meme, I think, to hate on Prime 4. But I was looking down my tier list, looking at the S tier and thinking, I don't really think there's any games in my S tier that I hear people talk about how much they hate. I'd say probably Afterimage is the one that people say, oh, it's overrated. I don't think it's overrated, but I know a lot of people say Afterimage is overrated. But Overhated, I don't think any of the games realistically in my S tier are hated by people. So I went down to my B tier. Biogun. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that they hate Biogun. Blasphemous, Aria of Sorrow, Dawn of Sorrow, Order of Ecclesia, Symphony of the Night, Crypt Custodian, Fist, Guacamelee 2, Metroid Dread, Metroid Fusion. I'd say that some people hate because of how kind of hand-holdy it is, which I appreciate. I've never heard anybody say they hate Mio, although I was annoyed with it at times. Nine Souls, Blind Forest, Pronti, Solitaria, Super Metroid Last Faith, Vigil, Voidwrought. No. So I went down into my B tier, which is where Prime 4 is, and it's like, that one stands out. It's reasonably recent, and it got a lot of shit. And I don't realistically think that Prime 4 is anywhere near as worthy of the shit that it got. And for those of you who watched my Prime 4 playthrough, you'll know that I really enjoyed it. There were a few things that I didn't like about it. It's why it's only in my B tier. But there were a lot of people out there that absolutely detest it. And just to prove to myself, realistically, that I didn't think Prime 4 was like way worse than Metroid Prime, I bought and played Prime Remastered on the Switch straight after. And I preferred, in many ways, Prime 4. Better controls, better responsiveness, better feeling, yada yada yada. Backtracking was more fun, and so on and so forth. Is there stuff in Metroid Prime 4 that is worthy of ridicule? Yeah. I think the desert area is probably a little bit too dull. The green crystal stuff, I can understand why people didn't like it. And the areas were a little bit more linear than maybe you get in a normal Metroid game. But equally, the last third of Metroid Prime, if you're trying to 100% it, I think's really shit. It's frustrating to get around. The map, whilst interconnected, is actually kind of annoying and boring to traverse, going back and forth, back and forth. And of course, it's an old game that lacks the quality of life and smooth controls of Prime 4. The constant combinations and switching and stuff, just there, no. So, yeah, I think Prime 4 is overhated. And I don't think there was anything realistically else that I would put in that box. So I'd say that's a lock-in. This next one is not. This is kind of placeholdery. I was looking again at my tier list and thinking, of these games on my tier list, what would I say is one that people just don't talk about? So I went through my A tier. No, I went to my S tier and thought, well, people talk about all of these. And then I looked at my A tier and I thought, well, Biogun doesn't get a whole lot of love. Pronti doesn't get a whole lot of love. Guacamelee 2, for whatever reason, doesn't get a whole lot of love. And Vigil the Longest Night. And it's like, when was the last time I heard anybody talking about Vigil the Longest Night? Vigil does a few things that I really like, including some that I'm not going to talk about because they're quite spoilery for the structure of the game and its plot. Is it the most technically amazing game? No. It's a Soulsvania, so you've got to like those. But I quite liked its story. I quite like the expansiveness of its world, and I think it does a lot of fun things. Its bosses were great. Its aesthetic is dark and grim and kind of Bloodborne-y, so it's quite Lovecraftian, realistically. So maybe naturally I was going to, get a kick out of it. But that's my current thought for underrated. You know, I figured I'd go down the S tier, and if I didn't think of anything that would go in the box, I'd go down to the A tier, and this is in my A tier. So it's a toss-up, really, because I don't think there's much point in going down to the B tier and choosing something from the B tier if there's something in the A tier that I think could fit in it. So I would argue that the choices for underrated are either Biogun, Pronti, Vigil, or Voidrot. All four in my A tier. So I think those are my choices for what I would put there if I was to try and create a finalised About Me Metroidvania. But I don't know whether I'm going to end up doing that. I've made a point over the last 6 months or so of saying that I'm not going to talk about the third game on the second row, and I'm going to continue not talking about the third game on the second row. I spent 96 hours mapping that game. I will not be returning for the DLC whenever that comes out. It went in a direction that I didn't like. I didn't enjoy it, don't get me wrong. It's beautiful. The attention to detail is fabulous. It has some amazing artwork, although I prefer the pixel art style of Blasphemous 2. But I didn't enjoy it. I didn't have fun with it. And video games are, for me, about having fun. So there was no... Well, actually, no, I lied. There was an alternative for this. Eterna Noctis could also... If I could put two games in that box, it would be those two. Moving on. This one is an absolute nightmare. Needs a remake. I don't honestly know what to put in that box. Of the games that I can think of, that I don't realistically think that any game in this genre needs a remake. Other genres, yeah, but needs... You know, Castlevania Symphony of the Night is still a very playable game. In much the same way that Super Metroid is still a very playable game. I personally think that Super Metroid is a much better game and a much more fun experience than Symphony of the Night. Although I think that Symphony of the Night does some very, very good things. If I was to take those two kind of classics, the only thing that I would change about Super Metroid is the feel of the jump. Because I don't like it. But I can mod it to change the feel of the jump. And I have done so. And I have played the game with slightly different gravity. And to me, it feels much better. Do I need anything else in the game to change? Absolutely not. It's great the way it is. Is it an S-tier Metroidvania? No, not for me personally. It might have been one of the founders of the genre, as people call it, but it's not for me a brilliant Metroidvania in the same way that some of the others in my A and S tier are. But it's a very good game. Symphony of the Night, I think, has more problems than Super Metroid. It's still a very good game, before the haters start typing away with their hate comments. But for me, the issues with Symphony of the Night are many. The game balance is awful. The reverse castle reveal is cool the first time, but never lands the same way again. Actually exploring the reverse castle kind of sucks. There's nothing very interesting to it. You know, it's just the same castle, but it's upside down. So it's kind of like, well, you're just retreading the same things with a slight twist. And it's fast. But I think I think the coolness of it is actually quite overrated in terms of, oh, it's got the reverse castle, that's such a cool thing. It's like, it's cool the first time, but do I look forward to the reverse castle on subsequent playthroughs? No, not really. Symphony of the Night has an amazing soundtrack, and many of the tracks are completely detached from where the songs are played. You know, the smooth jazz down in the underground caverns, it always is the example that I use. So, if I was to say, oh, well, you know, Symphony of the Night, quote unquote, needs a remake, all I'd really like to see is this wonderful pixel art just expanded to widescreen with some slightly more appropriate music in certain places. And I mean, I don't like consumables as healing, so that's something that I don't particularly like about Symphony of the Night. And I just like some better game balance, and maybe for them to do something a bit more interesting with the reverse castle. But yeah, does Symphony of the Night need a remake? No. There's nothing in the genre that I could really say, oh, that needs a remake. So I strongly suspect that this actually is a kind of generic template that's just been applied across various different genres. So do I think any games in the genre really need a remake? I can't actually get rid of this, can I? Can I? Oh, I can. There we go. I don't think any games in the genre really need a remake. Best biomes / environment. That's a tricky one. Frankly, that is a tricky one. In terms of what do I think some of the best realised biomes are? Blasphemous 2. Metroid Dread. Got so much detail in the animation and in the background environments. But overall, what is the game with the most quote-unquote tropey but iconic areas? Super Metroid. Without a doubt. As much as I will say, it's a really good game, but it's in some ways overrated. It has got... I count that as atmosphere as well, I guess. Atmosphere is tied to biomes and environment for me, and Super Metroid has it in spades. But Dread almost made it to there, frankly, for me. I think the biomes and environment in Dread are great, and Blasphemous 2 also has an amazing suite of biomes and environment. After Image also has an amazing suite of biomes and environments and manages to do something with them that isn't just super tropey. Soldiers also has some really nice biomes and environment. There are a lot of games that I think do biomes and environment pretty darn well. But when it comes down to it, I think this is one of those cases where the kind of progenitor of the genre is so strong that I just keep on coming back to it. And of course the music is tied into this as well. Yeah, the music is so closely tied to the biomes and environment in Super Metroid. But equally, I could put Grime there for its body horror environments. So again, this is why I don't tend to do these, because I kind of suck at them, and I'm hoping that my thoughts are more interesting than, here's this image of 16 boxes, yada yada yada. Moving on. Favourite protagonist in a Metroidvania? Samus. Moving on. I don't think there's a whole lot more that I need to say about that. In terms of protagonists for Metroidvanias, there aren't really a huge number to choose from, are there? Samus has been in the most Metroidvanias, I think, of any character, I would say. That's got to be right, surely. Because she's been in, I mean, even if we don't count the 3D ones, she's been in 5. I don't think anybody comes close to that, do they? No. I'm not even going to bother looking through my tier list for that one. Favourite protagonist is Samus. She's a badass. My only issue with Samus recently actually has been in Prime 4, where she doesn't talk. She's selectively mute for some reason. People are talking to her and kind of sounding like they expect her to respond, and she doesn't. And she's spoken in games before. She speaks in Dread. She doesn't say a lot. She says it in Jozo, which was fucking cool. Favourite protagonist, Samus in Metroid games. Best bosses. Oh gosh, this is a tricky one. I really like some of the bosses in Nine Souls. Lady Ethereal continues to be one of the fucking weirdest and most amazing bosses that and kind of fights in any game that I've played. Not just Metroidvania, just that was a super cool sequence experience encounter. Grime has some really, really good, memorable bosses. Again, tied to the music. But I don't think I can go through any games on my tier list and put anything else in that box except Hollow Knight. There are so many good bosses in that game. Obviously, there are some real standouts. We've got Nightmare King Grim, just like one of the best boss fights I've ever played. Frankly, the music was superlative. The fight itself was tight and well designed, and it felt fair and balanced around the average player skill. I don't know how many times I died to Nightmare King Grim. It was probably a lot, but I never got Orphan of Cost. I never rage quit, and it didn't take me 3 days to beat Grim. But there's a load of other bosses in there as well. The Soul Master, the Knight himself, the Radiance. There's even the first boss, the False Knight in Hollow Knight, is memorable. There were really good boss fights in Katama and Blasphemous 2 and Super Metroid and Grime and Grime 2 and Biogun and Prince of Persia The Lost Crown. But were there as many consistently good boss fights as there are and memorable as there were in Hollow Knight? No, not for me. So I think for me that's probably, unless something really kind of sticks out to me as something that I've missed. There's a lot of good stuff for me in games like Ender Lilies and Ender Magnolia, but the combat in those games is in my opinion not as interesting. And obviously Ori in the Blind Forest doesn't have any combat. Well, not really. Ori 2's got much better combat, but yeah. So those are my thoughts on best bosses. Best soundtrack. I am such a music-oriented person that this field is a tricky one. I really love the Grime soundtrack. All the tracks on there I will hum along to very easily. I've got them all basically memorised. Misbegotten Amalgam continues to be my favourite. Pale Skies ambient soundtrack is probably my second favourite track in the game. Grime 2 also has some excellent music. I've already mentioned that Super Metroid has excellent music. Blasphemous 2 has some good music. Silk Song has some good music, though I think it's probably mixed a little bit too low in the audio mix, so I don't remember it from my playthrough as much. Dragon Loop sadly doesn't have, or didn't have, particularly good music. One particular standout for me that you may or may not know, however, Vigil the Longest Night has an excellent soundtrack, and I will often listen to it. outside of the game. Just like I will listen to the Stellar Blade soundtrack, or I will listen to the Final Fantasy 15 soundtrack. Final Fantasy 15, especially the Blazing Tactician Ignis's DLC expansion, has some really, really fucking cool music. So Hollow Knight has got some iconic tracks, but I think for me overall, Grime might just pip it out. I think. I don't remember anything about the music of Prince of Persia, unfortunately. Nor do I remember anything realistically about the music of Katama. But yeah, I think probably Grime for that, unless there's something that I've forgotten about. Dragon Loop goes into most unique. There was no way it was going to be anything except Dragon Loop. It went into my S tier for its unique time power corridor thing. It's like it's literally why it's there. You know, the graphics in Dragon Loop, the music in Dragon Loop, the story in Dragon Loop, none of them are amazing. So it's like, why is it in the S tier? Because of the interestingness of the games. Interesting enough, the interestingness of the game's progression, which, yes, I'll keep that in mind as I go down to the next row. But yes, in terms of what is the most unique of all the games on my tier list is Dragon Loop, without a doubt. The time corridor and how it essentially becomes in some way a big puzzle. See, this is why I'm talking through things. But certainly it is the most unique. Not usually my thing, but I'm going to be honest with you. This was a fairly tricky one, because if it's not my thing, then usually I just don't play it. I certainly don't play it to completion. So Gal Guardian's Servants of the Dark is here because anime isn't normally my thing. Same with Tevi, realistically, but at least I enjoyed Gal Guardians. Whereas I didn't really enjoy Tevi all that much. So yeah, Gal Guardians with its fan service and its anime girls screaming all the time, it's really not my thing. But I actually kind of enjoyed the story, and the gameplay was alright. So I think that's as close as I can get to not usually my thing, but so yeah, I think that's a fairly solid lock-in. Best platforming, I think, has to be Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. It's so fluid. It's so fluid and maneuverable and acrobatic. I don't think it can be, for me, anything else. You know, Grime 2 has some really good platforming. It's much better platforming than it was when I first played it as well. I've spoken in the past about how I played a pre-release version of Grime 2 and I had real issues with the wall dash ability, and you know, I complained about it to Yarden, and he was like, "Are you sure it's not just a skill?" Well, no, he didn't say, "Are you sure it's not just a skill issue?" I'm not putting words in, but it was framed a little bit like it. Are you sure it's not just a you issue? But he looked into it, and it did turn out that there were some issues with it, and it's been patched again actually after launch to make it even better for people. So Grime 2 has some really, really, really good platforming. I'd say Grime 2's platforming for me actually almost rivals The Lost Crown. Almost. It's so very close. I haven't played The Lost Crown recently, but in my head, at the back of my mind, when I think great platforming, it's still Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I might have to play it again, because the last time I played it was September 2024, because I played it for the Mask of Darkness DLC. And if you were around on the channel at the time, you'll know that that's when my heart started going wonky. literally while I was playing the Mask of Darkness DLC. I sat down to play it, and I got through, I think it was it 15 minutes? The video's out on the channel. I played for about 15 minutes, and then I went to hospital for 14 plus hours. And had all manner of exciting things, because my heart started beating weirdly for 3 months. So I played through the Mask of Darkness DLC when I wasn't at my best, and I still think of it as a good experience. It might be that I could go back and watch that video and for me to actually say, you know what, the platforming in this sucked. I don't recall it sucking. I certainly don't think it was the best DLC, just in general. I think it was a little bit too disconnected and felt a lot like content that had been kind of shoved back in a place that it didn't really... It almost like the Third Sin, the castle in the Third Sin DLC for Blasphemous 2. It's kind of separate, but still fun, but kind of separate. So yeah, maybe I will go back to Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and try some of the platforming again, and then try it versus Grime 2's platforming and see which I like the feel of. But I'm pretty certain it's going to be Lost Crown and then Grime 2. But there might not be a lot in it. Best puzzles. This is a difficult one for me, because it depends what you class as puzzles, realistically. You know, I don't even think SteamWorld Dig 2 is a particularly good choice for that. But if you look at my tier list, which I know plenty of people do, it's possible. It's possible that needs to happen. It's possible that it needs to be Dragon Loop, because the entire second half of the game is a big puzzle. It's a puzzle to get through. Or you could argue that Ultros is for the majority, I can't really say the second half of the game, for everything after the first ending, an additional 20 hours is one big puzzle. But that's the thing, would I say it's the best puzzle? No, not really. I found it quite irritating. But and for Dragon Loop, it's best puzzles. But realistically, there's only one puzzle to solve to get the true ending. How do I get around this entire map within the 5 days without... Yeah, how do I get around the map to ring all 5 bells in the 5 days that I've got without resetting the loop? So it's really only a puzzle. Basically, I don't play a lot of puzzle games. I play some games with some puzzles in them, but nothing to me is really stands out in terms of, oh yeah, I like this game because of its puzzles. I played the demo for Echo Weaver recently, which is it's classified as a Metroidvania. It's about time looping and using your allotment of time wisely. And yeah, I mean, that seems to have quite a lot of really good puzzles in, but it's a demo, it's not the full game. I don't know how well my brain will cope with the full game. And if I look through all of my S tier, there's apart from Dragon Loop, none of the games in my S tier are puzzle focused, they're all combat focused. In my A tier, there's a lot of Castlevania games in my A tier. Dawn of Sorrow, Order of Ecclesia, Symphony of the Night, Aria of Sorrow. Are any of them what I would really call puzzle heavy? Not particularly. Metroid Fusion, Metroid Dread, Super Metroid are in that tier. Would I describe them as having a puzzle focus? No. Vigil, The Last Faith, Solitaria, Fronti, are these puzzle focused? No, not really. I can go down as the B tier. Would I say that any of these are particularly interesting puzzle-wise? We've got Somber Echoes. That's got some interesting puzzles. We've got Unworthy. The whole game is, in a sense, a bit of a puzzle because it's a Metroidvania without a jump button. So I don't really think I'm in a place where I can really say, this is a game with good puzzles. I mean, Tomb Water is on my tier list because it is a Metroidvania. It looks a bit like a top-down Zelda-like, but it's more of a Metroidvania. But would I say that that's got great puzzles? No, not really. My C tier, is there anything here that... I mean, Headlander, I could argue, is a slightly more puzzle-focused Metroidvania. Last Case of Benedict Fox. That could go there. That's got some good puzzles in it, although a lot of them are kind of deciphering stuff. It's not on my tier list, but you could potentially argue that Tunic is a Metroidvania. That's got some brilliant puzzles. Took me far too long to translate that language. So yeah, I don't think I'm realistically qualified to talk about puzzles because so few of the games that I play have got what I would consider to be good puzzles. It would have to be something like SteamWorld Dig 2 or Ultros or one of the Zelda-likes, which tend to be more dungeon focused and therefore have puzzles in them. And I've apart from Link's Awakening, I have tried to keep the Zelda-likes off this list, off this image, because I know people will moan about it. A game that everybody should play, Biogun. If you haven't played Biogun, it's great, it's charming, it's cute, it's colourful, it's got some really fucking cool biomes, it's got an absolutely banger soundtrack, and I hardly ever hear anybody talking about it, so that's an easy one in that box. When it comes to best abilities and best progression, I've got Grime 2 in both of these, but I'm not sure about them. In terms of best abilities, I love Samus's kit in Metroid games. I love the Shine Spark, I love the space jump, I love the screw attack, I love the different kind of missiles and stuff that she can get. I like her expanded arsenal of abilities that she's getting as she goes through the games. I like infinite wall jump. I like the kind of the I can't remember what they're called in Dread. Is it Thunder Rockets or something like that? That kind of lock onto various things and home in. Cross bombs, so on and so forth. Different types of bombs. I think Samus has got a really good kit. And obviously a lot of games have drawn from that in terms of their inspirations. Which, considering it came out in 1994, is quite impressive. For Super Metroid. I mean, not Metroid Dread. And a lot of the games, a lot of Metroidvanias basically stick to, it's got a double jump. It's got an air dash. It's got a high jump or what have you. Grime 2 is kind of the same in the sense that its abilities are in many ways derivative or derivations of classics. It's got a double jump with a twist, at least. It's got an air dash without a twist. It's just an air dash. But Grime 2 has got 19. I want to say, is it 19 or 16? I think it's 19, but I could be wrong on that, and I'm not going to go and check. I might check in editing. Editing, as if I do editing. Grime 2's got a lot of abilities. And because it's got such a range of abilities, obviously some of them are going to really stand out. I really loved the pull mechanic in Grime 1. And I loved how it expanded in terms of, okay, first of all, you can pull stuff, and then eventually it becomes a grapple thing, and so on and so forth. You know, it combines some basic abilities that you might see in other games, like a grapple hook, like a double jump, like an Ori Bash style thing, but it felt unique to the game. Yeah, I mean, the way Grime does its grapple points isn't too dissimilar from how Order of Ecclesia does its magnets, or the Magnus glyph, if I remember correctly. You know, it arranges it around a point and so on and so forth, which again is very similar to what Ori did with Bash. But there's just something about the original Grime where everything felt very thematic and very, you know, it was all about manipulating force and gravity, which made sense because you were a black hole. Grime 2 expands massively on the number of abilities. Sure, not all of them are massively amazing, but there's just a lot of them. And they still feel quite unique to me. You know, there was a lot made about the kind of paint wall dash thing in Constance, and how you had to specifically dash into a wall. It's like it's kind of the same thing in Grime 2, I mean, but it just feels better in Grime 2. As I said, it didn't in the pre-release version that I played, but it definitely does now. So yeah, best abilities is a tricky one, and I've got Grime 2 here just because it's got such a wide suite of them. But there are other games, you know, Dragon Loop has got far fewer abilities, but they're quite weird and interesting. Ultros has got, you know, a suite of weird abilities. Somber Echoes has got some weird abilities. I particularly like its lantern mechanic. Voidwrought has got a couple of abilities that I think you can probably break the game with too early. Mio has got some great abilities, which turns it into some really interesting platforming. I'd forgotten about Mio. When it comes to this, I still think Prince of Persia probably has better platforming. I would say that Mio has more rewarding exploration than Prince of Persia does, but I think, ooh, Mio. I really do like the platforming in Mio. But I think, oh, that's, that might be a close one. It's possible that if I hadn't had such a foul experience control-wise with Mio, which has now been patched, it's possible that if I hadn't had such a foul experience with the platforming controls-wise in Mio, it's possible that that might even have pipped the Lost Crown. But even now, multiple months onwards, when did Mio come out? I've forgotten. January, end of January. Even now, I've still got a kind of at the back of my mind feeling of rage from the Crucible in Mio. But yeah, that's definitely a contender for, because I really like the idea of the platforming in Mio, but the pulling it off with the down attack controls being so fucking flaky, that annoyed me. And actually the energy draining place down in the bottom right was frustrating as well, more than it needed to be. Anyway, I was talking about best abilities. So yeah, I think Grime 2, just by virtue of the fact that it's got so many of them, even if some of them aren't necessarily like super cool abilities. And then best progression. I don't really know what that's getting at. You know, is it best progression of character, as in level ups? Is it best progression through the game, as in freeform, guided, non-guided? So I don't really know what that actually wants me to look at. And if I go back to Guru's version of this, oh, he's got Somber Echoes with best puzzles. I haven't played Vernal Edge, so I've played like 20 minutes of it or something like that. So he's got best progression in Grime. Yeah, it depends what you mean by progression, realistically. If you mean an ever-expanding sense of unlocking abilities, finding secrets, rewarding exploration, making progress through a game, then yes, I think Grime 2. I think Grime 2 in many ways does its systems better than Grime 1. Not necessarily by much, but when combined with the more interesting abilities and platforming and the expanded combat without the stamina meter and so on and so forth, I do feel that Grime 2 really does a good job in terms of that, if that's what you mean by progression. If you mean, you know, it's got the best character progression system in terms of RPG style mechanics, you know, leveling up and so on and so forth. Mandragora's got a pretty good progression system in that regard. You know, it's got a skill tree and so on and so forth for that. Fist Forged and Shadow Torch has got some decent progression in that regards. Magnolia and Lilies are both good for that. Biomorph has got some I suppose Biomorph has more abilities than progression. Yeah, I don't really know what that is getting at. What does it mean by progression? So I've given my definition of, you know, going through the game, finding stuff, finding things that are rewarding. Don't get me wrong, some people might say, oh, Mio has got a really interesting exploration that is rewarding and so on and so forth. And yes, it does. But it's also got some places that I think are unnecessarily frustrating, and it's... I would argue Mio's biggest failing for me in terms of progression was the fact that it has those health loss places. And don't get me wrong, I know that the triggers that take your hit points away are avoidable if you know exactly where they are. So you can play the game without getting that happen. And I know that the world is balanced around it and that enemies lose health when you do as well and so on. So I know all of that. But there is something for me that even knowing that is psychologically... this is going to sound so hyperbolic, but it's psychologically damaging to a feeling of progression to lose health. Especially when it is... It takes some time and effort to find 4 pieces of heart to get... I think it's 4. Is it 4 in Mio? I think it is. I can't remember. It's been a while. It's psychologically damaging, realistically. And as I said, that does sound very hyperbolic. To go... to find that, to get a new health point, and then to have it taken away. You know, that's backwards. Likewise, there was absolutely no chance that any game with hard checkpointing was going to go into this category, because I think that is antithetical to a forward feeling of progression. Hard checkpointing is anti-progression. It is more about game time padding. For me, a lot of people like it, but for me, retreading my steps is just not a good feeling. So, I'm not going to say, oh, you know, people saw Guru's thing and asked me for this. No, nobody's asked me for this. The only person that said, oh, I should do this is Guru himself. When I said, I've got my comments here, ooh, dare I do this and publicly share it? And he told me to do it. So I haven't realistically done it, but I've put some thoughts onto film, so to speak. Those are my thoughts on these things. And if nothing else, maybe this helps you get into the mind of me. I wouldn't stay too long. It's very strange in here. Let's be super clear. It doesn't matter to me whether you agree or disagree with any of these things. If you think Silksong is not overrated at all, how dare I? I don't care. I'm not going to have comments enabled on this video, I don't think. It's almost certainly going to get disliked to shit because I've said stuff like, Silksong's overrated. I Turn the Notch is overrated. Metro Prime 4 was shit, or whatever. You know. But if you have watched this video through to the end, you've sat through an hour somehow of me trying to form coherent thoughts. First of all, well done. If I could give you a cookie somehow via the medium of the internet, I would do. You clearly have sterling constitution. But those are my thoughts. One thing that I find interesting, and one thing that kind of made me think, yeah, this is a more general thing that has been tied to Metroidvania. It's like, there's nothing about maps on here. Yeah, which game has got the best map? Which game has got the worst map? It's like, best map? Let me see. End of Magnolia. Worst map? Possessors was pretty bad. Constance's wasn't great, though it's a little better now than it was. Yeah, things that I could talk about. Good maps, bad maps. But, yeah, it is what it is. Those are my thoughts. As I said, you can't go crazy in the comments because I can't be bothered to deal with the hate that I'm sure I will get for trying to present to you some thoughts and my personal opinions about what I find fun and value. If you find different things fun and you value different things, that's cool. That's the human condition. It shows that you are not a robot. But if you think that shouting at me and slagging me off for my thoughts on things is going to change my mind, you belong in the Houses of Parliament debating, because that's the kind of shouty behaviour that doesn't make you look great. So, that's about me. From a Metroidvania perspective, has that been enlightening? God knows. But it is what it is. That's almost an hour and 10 minutes. I'm impressed I've actually managed to talk for this long. That's actually quite good going for me, though it does mean that I can't record anything else tonight now because my throat is it's going to be a bit sore. Thank you for watching. Have yourselves a wonderful day. And I'll catch you all in whatever the next piece of kind of shitty content that I put out is. I've got nothing lined up. So, yeah, I figured this would fill a gap. Have a great day. Cheerio. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, why not click the like button and consider subscribing? Remember, you can ring the bell notification icon to get notified when new videos go live. And until next time, cheerio.